dry bread, so old bread, right? So this isn't even good, nice, fresh bread. Like a big squishy loaf of hot French bread. Yum, right? I could eat the whole loaf just sitting down and enjoying that bad boy. But it'd be better to have old bread, the kind you whack your sibling with and it hurts because it's big and like a log, but with quietness. Now, quietness, both I think the Hebrew and Greek, we'll find, just to bring some fun verses in, in Timothy, where it talks about women learning in silence, that's the same word, Greek word, that's translated peaceful just a few verses earlier in 1 Timothy 2. And so that's kind of the idea, is like it's a word that can be taken different ways. And I actually think peaceful would be a better translation, perhaps down later in 1 Timothy. But that's the idea, is that quietness and peace. It's the idea of a stillness, that there's not, crazy waves. It's a still sea. It's calm, it's quiet, it's peaceful, it's restful. So it carries that entire weight, right? So it's better to have a dry morsel and have peace than to have a house full of feasting but strife, that there's anger, there's frustration, there's contention, there's hatred. Who cares if you got all this stuff if you don't have peace? And we worship the God of all peace and the God of all comfort, and that he promises us peace that surpasses understanding. So if we're doing things his way, well, we should have peace. So all that said, Susan, Mariella, Amos, whoever else is watching, let's flip on over to 1 Timothy chapter 6 now. Oh, I've quoted 1 Timothy twice. I was thinking, after Job, I think I might actually do the Psalms on Sunday nights. Even though we're doing the Psalms on Wednesdays, I thought about doing them on Sundays. But then I've also thought about the pastoral epistles. Even if we're still doing John in the morning, maybe I'll start doing the pastoral epistles on Sunday nights. So in 1 Timothy chapter 6, feel free to click the share button so your friends can hear this, because it's important. Starting in verse 6, we could back up and look at some other stuff maybe a little bit, but, it's talking about, again, strife is there in verse 4. So that's our word that we had in the Proverbs, right? Strife, useless wrangling. So it's just talking about, all this kind of stuff. But verse 6, now godliness with contentment is great gain. You know what? If we can grow spiritually, if we can make our aim spiritual maturity and spiritual gain and spiritual growth in this world, and then just be content with worldly things, how much gain would we have? Think of this. Why is it that maybe you and so many other Christians aren't growing as quickly as they could? It's because they don't have worldly contentment. I think much of the church, dare I say the majority of the church, so maybe not you, but again, they're not growing because they're not content with worldly things. Thus, they're striving for more worldly things, and this is the very thing Jesus warns about in the parable of the sower. That the cares of this world and the pursuit of riches, and so it's kind of a balance of two sides. So worried, the cares or worries of this world and all these worldly things, and the pursuit of riches. And maybe it's not the pursuit of great riches, but you'd sure like a nicer car, or whatever it may be. And so these are the weeds that hinder the plant from growing and producing the fruit that it could potentially grow. And so on the flip side of that, now godliness, growing in godliness, which would be producing much Christian fruit with contentment, is a great gain. We have worldly contentment. We're just happy. What do you mean by worldly contentment? Well, what I mean by that is we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. That is a New Testament echo of Job 121, right? Naked I came, naked I return. I brought nothing in, and I can't take anything out with it, So Job realizes. I think that's something realizing too. You came into this world naked. If by chance you're not naked right now, you don't have to comment, then you have more than you started with. I think that's part of what Job was saying. He's lost everything, but he has this sackcloth he's wearing. Well, he's got more than he started with. But when he dies, none of it will go with him. Absolutely none of it. The only thing you can take with you to heaven are your prepaid heavenly rewards. I forget where I recently heard it, but it's that idea that earthly money, filthy lucre, for some King James verbiage, can be converted. Before I went to the Middle East, I went to my bank and I converted some American dollars into some Jordanian dinar and Saudi reals. So I had them while I was there. You can take your filthy lucre right now and you can convert it into a heavenly currency. You can convert it into heavenly currency that when you arrive in heaven, there it is waiting for you and you've got it still. But you can't take anything from this world with you, but you can send stuff on ahead. Now, like I just said, verse 7, right? For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out, and having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. So, if you are just tuning in, and Enrique, I saw your question. Thank you for asking that question. It's always great when people want to participate. We flipped from Proverbs 17:1 over to 1 Timothy 6, right? Because Proverbs 17:1 said, better is a dry morsel with quietness than a house full of feasting with strife. So we started on this verse that, again, it would be better to have hard old bread, but peace and quiet and rest, than have all this feasting and strife. And so godliness with contentment is great gain is where we got sent over to, 1 Timothy 6:6. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. Now, a great question. Enrique asks, how would you balance complacency versus contentment? And I would say it's very simply this then, is that contentment, godliness with contentment. So if you're being godly, you won't be complacent. You see, I think there's maybe a difference where, I'm trying to think of like a catchy way to throw this all together, but it's like we should be proactive in the godly stuff and becoming content in the worldly stuff. But if we're quote unquote content with nothing, but have no godliness, then we're complacent. And that's a weird in the middle place that doesn't, that's not godly, right? That's not doing anything. That's just being a bump on the log. And actually, Enrique, we've already covered some, and we're going to be covering some, as you know, in the Proverbs. What does the Proverbs say about laziness, right? I mean, the Proverbs says a lot about the sluggard. That's pretty straightforward, right? It's not lazy if you're sacrificing worldly pursuits for heavenly pursuits. If you just do nothing, then you're a nothing. I mean, that's the kind of the idea. So it's in some sense, someone might not understand or try and disguise their complacency by calling it contentment. But again, it's this 1-2 punch. We're supposed to be having godliness with contentment. We're supposed to be seeking God's things and then just being content with earthly things. So I think if you're just being content with earthly things and doing nothing, you're the lazy man, you're the sluggard, and all those other things the Proverbs say. Now, I want to say this to kind of wrap up this morning. I just wanted to focus on this idea of contentment, that I don't need all this stuff, and I just need to learn to be content. And I need to learn, the Lord will increase as he sees fit, and I just need to, focus on keeping the main thing. Notice as those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. So, those who desire to be rich, who strive to be rich, who make their priority to be rich, there's a problem there, because they're going to get snared by this stuff. It's going to catch them. For, he gives a reason. What's the problem? It's for the love of money, right? The love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. People maybe started well, but then a door opened to pursue more wealth, and that pursuit killed all of that godliness that they had originally been striving at. It hindered their heavenly rewards. And so they're going to leave a lot back on earth and take very little into heaven. Now, I wanted to point this out, though, because I want to give balanced teaching. And so often I want to say pastors, preachers, people will quote these sections of 1 Timothy. But my Bible titles, it's a New King James title, verses 17 and 19, instructions to the rich. Command those who are rich in this present age to give everything away so that they can be poor. That's not what it says. To not be haughty, because we just read about how, haughty spirit comes before the fall. Not to trust in uncertain riches. Maybe you might be rich, but don't put your faith in your riches. But put them in the living God, who gives us richly all things to enjoy, and let them do good, that they may be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share, storing up for themselves a good foundation for the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life. I bring all this up because there's nothing wrong with being rich. In fact, I'm fully supportive of rich people who like to tithe joining my church. No, but the point is there's nothing wrong with riches. And that's something that there is a false attitude in the church that somehow being in poverty is more holy or spiritual. In all reality, taking yesterday's talk, or the day before yesterday, I think, on humility, and then today's on contentment. And if you pair those together, then you just don't worry. You see, if you're content with whatever God gives you, and you're humble, then wherever God takes you, whatever, you end up being rich and you're fine with that. Or you're not rich and you're fine with that. That's the idea. Because again, when you're humble and you're seeking the Lord and you're seeking godliness and contentment first, because of your humility, and you're recognizing that God is the one who does it, right? This is a God thing. In fact, that's kind of some of Sunday's text. It's John the Baptist. Hey, no man can have anything unless God's given it to him, right? Every good and perfect gift comes from above, from the Father of lights, right? No variation, shadow turning. The idea is that if I end up being middle class, well, that's fine because I'm seeking godliness and contentment. I'm humble. I don't care where I end up. I'm upper middle class. Well, that's great. That's fine. I'm seeking godliness and contentment. And I have a little bit of more that I can give away and help others with. You end up being what some might consider wealthy. Well, that's fine because I'm seeking godliness and contentment. And now I have all the more that I can give away and help people with. And so, again, it does fall back on. It's not so much riches or not riches, but where the heart is at. And those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. So again, the Bible warns really clearly about that desire to be rich. But I will say this too. I always tell people, like Dave Ramsey, it's the get rich slow program. And it really is. In fact, in many ways, because God has different plans for everyone, right? So, but in many ways, I think if people got saved young, teenagers got saved, I think almost all Christians, especially those like in America where the opportunity is there, right? I don't think this maybe applies in Africa, but in America, most Christians who get saved young will probably end off well-to-do. Because the Bible promotes hard work. The Bible promotes wisdom. The Bible promotes frugality and faithfulness. If you just live by the biblical principles, you will likely get a good job, not waste your money, and make wise investments. And, my wife and I will just close on, I think, we've always been on the Get Rich Slow program. We used to have the most ridiculous budget to survive off of because we had nothing. But we have very slowly just continued to move over on the spectrum because wise investments, trying to be faithful in our careers, faithful in what we do, and then continue to make small sacrifices for long-term gains, that kind of stuff. So I think most Christians, especially those who start living by these principles young, and I think all of you can agree, depending on how old you are and where you are in your walk of life, it's tougher if you don't start making these decisions till way later on. But again, teach our kids, right? Teach our children these principles, godly principles to live by as teenagers where they're going into life, thinking about hard work, thinking about careers, faithfulness, frugality, wisdom. And so all that said, though, but you know what? You won't be faithful and frugal and have wisdom if your mindset isn't godliness with contentment is great gain. It's the people who are discontent that are buying all the junk. The people who are discontent, who always have to have the newest this and newest that. And so they'll have a few nice things right now, but they'll never actually amass that wealth. So things to think about, but all coming back, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as you're content. Who cares how much money you have? And you might have all the money in the world and not have peace. Who cares how much money you have if you're miserable? And who cares if you're lower middle class, if you're happy? And that's one of those things. And different people have different visions and dreams for their homes and whatnot. But I know a lot of people we're just happy this way. We're happy with my wife staying home with the kids, instead of working a job. We're happy with us having less stuff, but we have more free time because my husband doesn't work overtime. It's that kind of stuff. It's that godliness with contentment that is a great gain. Aim for that contentment. Aim for your spiritual health. Some of you might not be very well-to-do financially in this world, but you're going to enter into heaven far, far ahead of many rich men. So keep that in mind. All right. God bless you guys. That proverb just gave me a good reason to detour. And we've been going a little longer the last few days. So I'll try and keep it shorter tomorrow. No, today's Friday. Monday, I'll keep it shorter. So God bless you guys. Have a great day. And I will see you guys around.